Mr. Gagan Sharma. Indian wine market has observed high growth owing to increasing popularity of wines, increase in disposable income, growing consumption of alcohol between women, etc. Wine in India is gaining importance as a mainstream drink and is being consumed on various occasions, both at home and at restaurants and bars. Ladies and gentlemen, we are happy to have with us Mr. Gagan Sharma, who would be tackling the subject, aging, wine markets of India. May I now request Professor Zakaria Joseph to share a few words of introduction about Mr. Gagan Sharma. Over to Professor Zakaria Joseph.
Thank you, Shama, and a very warm welcome to everyone uh, to day 3 of the FDP on hospitality trends. After 2 days of culinary journey and talking about foods, it's time to make way for the beverages. We have a very interesting set of speakers lined up today who will be sharing their expertise and experiences with us. Our first speaker for today is Mr. Gagan Sharma, who will be taking us through the world of the Indian wine market. A few words about Mr. Sharma. Mr. Gagan Sharma is a certified sommelier and mixologist, wine educator, travel and trade writer, with professional and educational experience over a decade. He is a graduate in Bachelor of Science in Hospitality and Hospitality Administration from Institute of Hotel Management, India. He has done his post-graduation from Victoria University, Australia in Masters in Hospitality Studies. He holds a diploma in Wine and Spirit Education Trust, United Kingdom. He's also a specialized in wines and has received certification from French Wine Scholar, United States. He worked as a restaurant manager in Caboose Restaurant, Australia, and also as a managing director in Institute of Wine and Beverage Studies, India. He works as a certified sommelier and wine educator at Why Not Beverage Solutions Private Limited in India, and is a key educator to many hotel brands such as Taj, Oberoi, Leela, ITC, and other hotels. He's also the founder and director of Indulge Academy, which is India's only wine and beverage school. His interests include traveling, mountaineering, paragliding, writing, and reading. So it's over to you, Gagan, on aging wine markets of India.
Right. Mr. Zakaria, thanks a lot for this introduction. You've made me sound as if I'm a rock star in the industry, which I don't think I am. But thanks a lot for this introduction. Thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity. When I was a student about a few years ago, about 15 years ago, I didn't think that I will be talking at a platform like this. But it is thanks to the growing market, wine market in India. We guys being exposed to an era where, there was a transition happening in the wine industry. Very lucky that we entered the market at the right time, entered the industry at the right time, and saw that change from the, the previous generation passing on the reins to the new generation, and there being a little bit of a, drift, a little bit of a changeover rather in the industry, and a lot of international attention coming to India. So overall, the last 12-15 years of what I have worked in the industry, in the Indian industry, and very closely so on the ground in the wine market, both on the production side as well as the sales and the service side of it. Even before we say anything, I must say it has been a great journey, and I think we have to be very proud about the fact what India has achieved in the last few years. And that is what we will be talking about. So, of course, everybody has their own perceptions about what wine is and how the industry is, and especially how India is. But what I'm going to do today is start from the real scratch, as back as we can go, from mythology, going into the Mughals, going into Ghalib, going into the British, and from there to the today era. And I'll touch upon a few technical facts as well, and then finally finish on a few numbers that would justify, what we are trying to achieve here. The fact that India is a growing market and it's a promising market, and probably that is the reason why everybody is looking at India, right? As a going market to be in, amongst the top 10 markets in the world to be in. And if in case there's any discussion in the middle, please do feel free to ask me then and there, and I'll be more than happy to, because quite honestly, Wednesday morning, 1.5 of speaking is tricky for me, and I'm pretty sure it is tricky for everybody to even hear it. So if in case you wish to stop me in the middle and ask me, please do feel free to do that. Because I'm touching on a few facts from mythology, a few facts from various cultures and religions, I'll try and be very sensitive. But again, these are facts that I've picked up from books and history books, more importantly. So yeah, so if in case you feel any different about them, please do stop me and ask me to share more details into it. So yeah, I think I should be able to share my presentation. Yeah, okay. Right, so this is the presentation. I hope everybody can see it. If in case, Mr. Zakaria, if you could just tell me if in case you can see the presentation properly.
Yes, Gagan is good.
Yep. All right. So as I said, we'll start from the real scratch, go from mythology onwards to what it is today. India is considered not to be a traditional alcohol drinking country, but the facts are actually the opposite of that. We are considered to be a new country in terms of alcohol production, which is not really true. We are new because of our struggle with independence. We are a 75, 80-year-old country, but that is not to say that alcohol did not play a role in our history, in our development as a nation. Rather, it was always the cornerstone. So even before India, let's go back, to where did alcohol actually start from? So we generally say it was Mesopotamia where it started from. And straight into facts, there is a goddess of alcohol. Her name is Ninkasi, Ninkasi, simple as that. Ninkasi is the goddess of alcohol, and her poem, or let's say in the Hindi word we use the word arti. Her arti, or a poem, or her ode, was basically the recipe of creating alcohol, which is the first thing a newborn child was taught even before ABCD or 1, 2, 3 or Papa Mummy or whatever it was. And the reason why that was done was because every child from their birth were taught how to make alcohol. And when we say alcohol, we're not talking about 40%, 50% alcohol. We're just talking about lightly fermented beverages, which could be as small as a curd, which is also lightly fermented. And the idea behind that was the air was polluted, water was polluted. We didn't know how to store our food properly. And we're talking about 5000 BC, before the pyramids of Giza came up. And the idea at that point in time was very simple, that you eat whatever you eat, you drink whatever you drink. You do not know if in case you're taking E. coli, salmonella, or what sort of gut disorder you are putting into your body, to wash that off as an antidote, as the basic liquid for survival, right? You would drink some amount of fermented beverage. Alcoholic or non-alcoholic is a separate matter altogether, just to survive. So, our mythology ranges back behind those 5000 BC era as well. So, one of the first things where alcohol is mentioned is this picture, which is called Samudra Manthan or Samudra Manthan, where basically the gods and the demons, they got together. So you can see there is Shiva, there is Brahma, and they are called the God, the generator, the operator, and the destroyer of the universe. And that's why probably God as a term comes up, something that I learned in the temples of Khajuraho. So the gods and the demons, they basically realize that at the bottom of the ocean there lies this pot, a kalash, which has amrut in it, or holy water in it, which if in case consumed will deem you immortal. And of course the demons wanted that, but at the same time the gods didn't want that to land into the hands of the demons. So basically they churned the ocean. As you can see here, they're churning the ocean, and from that came a goddess. Her name was Varuni. Varun probably indicates the god of water anyway. So Varuni came up, and she brought two kalash, as you can see in the picture here. One was basically the holy water, the other one was poison, which is what Lord Shiva basically drank and stored in his throat. So basically, humanity lived. But the focus here is this lady called Varuni, who was the goddess of alcohol. So in India, in our mythology, ranging back even before Ninkasi ever came into existence, alcohol has been a part of it. It has been a part of our mythology. We all know Shiva used to drink. A lot of other gods used to drink as well. But again, alcohol was not drunk. Rather, alcohol was not considered to be evil or demoness or something of that sort. Rather, it was considered the antidote to survival, and that's where the you know the term in Gaelic language also comes, which is Uzega Betha, which means the water of life, the water that you would drink to sustain livelihood. Now, Varuni is the goddess that came up out of this, and the gods of gods who lives in the heaven, Indradev. He basically was super impressed by this lady and the recipes that she had and the quality that she had of creating alcohol. He basically took Varuni after this incident and invited her to the heavens. And Varuni was the one who taught Indradev in the heavens how to make alcohol. And how were they making alcohol? By the simplest, oldest ingredient, honey. And that is where you would say Sura or Soma were the drinks that came out of it, which of course Indradev was a big fan of, and a lot of monks and other people used to drink it. We know it. Even before wines, there was a honey drink which is now called mead, fermented honey drink, which India has started to produce again now, which is not considered beer, but rather comes into the sets into the category of wines because it basically is a fermented beverage. Indradev was drinking it, and do remember this lady Varuni, because she will come back and play quite an important role in another tale in the mythology. Right. So after this, of course, there was a massive era where again gods and demons were fighting. There were a lot of battles happening. Various other things were happening. But was it all done by men? Because if you see, there are all men here. There are all men here except one lady there. Not really. So then we come into the first big book of mythology, or the big chapter of mythology, which is Ramayana, which happened before Mahabharata. And any idea when was Ramayana actually written, or when did the Battle of Ramayana actually happen? Which era was it? Just to make your life easy, let me tell you, it was before 5000 BC. So if anybody wants to play a bet on it, what was the number before 5000 BC? So if in case you have any idea when was Ramayana actually written, or when did it occur? If you have an idea, please do drop it in the chat, or if in case you want to unmute and just answer that, I think it'll be fun. Nope, nothing. Okay, cool. I think the coffee is still to hit. But yeah,
we have something in the chat box, Gagan.
okay. I think I'm sharing the screen, so I can't read it.
Yeah. Tetra Yoga by Mr. Hari, Abhay, Vivek. They have responded.
But I'm just looking for digits as to when did it happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, nothing on this. 5,000 years ago, which you already mentioned.
Yeah, before 5,000 years actually. Yeah. All right, cool. So Ramayana happened first, and surprisingly, it happened in 7,292 BC, which is really, really old. And again, as I said, it was not just the men who were drinking alcohol, rather women earlier in the days played a bigger role than men when it came to the kitchens, when it came to cookery, to even alcohol creation. Rather, in the Egyptian era, it was the only and only for the ladies to produce alcohol. Men were not allowed to touch alcohol at all. There was a very simple idea that the men are going to be working as laborers and construction workers. Ladies were not allowed to do that, and they were the actual cradle of civilization by creating alcohol and putting that up there. Now, during Ramayana, there are two incidences where what happens is, once these two brothers, were sent on exile, on which Sita actually accompanied them. There comes this chapter where they are supposed to cross a river, and the river erupts, and she says, turns into into a human physique, and she says, no, you cannot leave this geographical area, this city or this state. And Ram, being humble, he says, why would you not allow us to cross it? Because you know what, we've been given the order by our father. For us, he is the ultimate man. If we don't cross it, we'll basically disappoint him, and we don't want to do that. The river says, listen, my identity is by the virtue of flowing through your area, and if you leave the area, my identity will be destroyed. And at this point in time, Lakshman gets a little angry. He pulls up his bow and arrow, tries to intimidate the river. And the lady steps in and she says, listen, this is not how you talk to ladies, let me handle this on my own. And Sita comes into the picture and she says, listen, let us cross the river and we will give you 100 amphoras of wine. 100 amphoras of wine, and an amphora was about 500 liters, so you're looking at 50,000 liters of wine to the river, right? But again, if you were to look at it, why would the river require alcohol? Well, alcohol is an is an antidote. It pures water. So you're basically not saying that I'm going to intoxicate you. What you're saying is I'm going to purify you. And that is what Sita says. Again, in another chapter, they come and they cross either Ganga or Yamuna. I forget the name of the river. And this time, the river turns rather aggressive and almost demonous. And Sita again steps in and she says, listen, this time I'll give you 100 amphoras of wine and 100 amphoras of rice cooked in meat. Probably the earlier renditions of biryani, right? And again, biryani and rice were given to the river and the river let them cross it. This is an alcohol which was ideally made with rice, not with grape juice, really, not really wine, but rice, fermented rice was also considered to be wine. And the name of the alcohol is Myria. If you ever wish to look it up, please do know that I'm not faffing. This is the reality. And Sita steps in. There was a time, again, might sound controversial, but there was a time when Ram actually offers Sita a drink and Sita says, no, I'm not going to drink it. And Ram actually says, if the goddess Earth can drink it, consume it, if you put it on the soil and she absorbs it, are you purer than goddess Earth? And Sita says, no. Then he says, yeah, then we should probably have a toast today. And Sita actually consumes alcohol, which is not a big deal. Earlier in the days, as I said, ladies were making alcohol. So ladies consuming alcohol has become a taboo only recently. From here, a few years on, not a few years, actually few thousand centuries on, we come to Mahabharata. And in Mahabharata, alcohol is prevalent. Alcohol is so prevalent that it is surprising. What we do know is Varuni, the goddess of alcohol, which we were talking about earlier, gets married to Balram. Balram is the elder brother of Lord Krishna. So in a way, of course, Krishna, Draupadi, Balram, and Varuni, they were supposed to be like the closest of friends. And it was often written in Mahabharata that Balram, Draupadi, and Krishna were sitting by the river and consuming alcohol and getting notorious, where you would have heard the stories that Lord Krishna stole makhan from the amphoras, took the clothes away, hid them, and was being naughty basically. They were intoxicated. Even the biggest chapter of Mahabharata, when Cheer Haran happens and when these guys were playing Chopal or the modern era Ludo, we all know that they were intoxicated and they were drinking alcohol. This was a different type of alcohol, not really rice based, but grape and honey based, right? Commercial sugar did not come into being till 1843, I guess, if not wrong. No, 1843 was sugar cubes. Sugar came before that. Anyway, sorry. And this alcohol was called Basia. Grape juice, raisins, basically, raisins and honey-based wine was made. And yeah, these guys were consuming alcohol, and probably they were consuming a lot of alcohol because of war. Now, what happens when wars happen? If in case there are dead bodies and you pile them up, eventually plague will happen. And you do not want that. So you have two options, either to bury them but that again is a very taxing process. So even in World War, this was to happen, which is what, barely 70, 80 years ago. What people would do is they would take the bodies and they would just throw it in the river, and the bodies would wash off and it would become a problem for somebody else, something which has been happening in UP and Bihar as well recently. Right. And the reason why wine became important was because river water or stream water was the purest form of water, or rather the most prevalent form of water at that time, even recently. And people used to just put their noggins in that and drink it. Now imagine if there are dead bodies or carcasses in it. Of course, the water is polluted, and to cure yourself, to cure yourself, to keep yourself healthy, you had to consume alcohol. So wine was the drink of choice. Why was the wine drink of choice? Well, grape is an ivy plant, like money plant. You take a leaf, you put it in water, and it naturally grows automatically. So it's an ivy plant. You don't really have to grow it. You don't really have to feed it. Grapes occur by natural phenomena. Their juice have sugar in it. The moment they open up, there is yeast naturally available in the air. The yeast and the sugar talk to each other and can create alcohol. So probably dinosaurs were also drinking alcohol and having a nice party. So to make beer, you need to have grains, convert that into sugar, convert that into germination, steeping, malting, all that process. The oldest drinkable alcohol actually, which predates human existence, was wine. The first human made alcohol was made out of honey, which is soma, somras, sura, whatever you want to call it. Now, from Mahabharata, we come to, again, this is all mythology, but now we come into the human era, still pre-Jesus era, and comes this another handsome bald man called Chanakya, under the reign of Chandragupta Maurya. Chanakya was the first viticulturalist in India. And under Chandragupta Maurya, under Chanakya, there was a proper study of agriculture that happened. Chanakya was India's first agricultural minister. He basically started growing things technically and scientifically with the study of their climate, of the geography, of the soil, and all of those things. So a systematic agricultural came into being. And Chandragupta Maurya appointed Chanakya to also take care of alcohol, because earlier in the days, sage, monks, and all of these people, the religious order used to control dawa and daru, because daru or sharab or alcohol was basically a form of medicine. If you know anything about alcohol, you would know from brandy to whiskey to gin to vodka, all of them, or even wine, all of them were first created by monks, and then came into the royalty, then came into the public eye, and then came even to the lower strata of the society. So alcohol was always used as a medicine. And Chanakya, as you can see, was a guru, he was a monk, he was still a sage, and various other things. So he was made responsible for creation and controlling of alcohol as a medicine. He realized that people need to meet together and explore ideas. So he created taverns on the street sides, like how we have dhaba or chai ki dukan on either sides of the street. He created taverns where alcohol was served. So basically, he created India's first proper bars in a way, where drinks were served out of these big wooden barrels or amphora casks or various other elements. And uh, the most refined minds of the society would actually meet at these taverns and drink alcohol. They would discuss a lot of stuff. Very creative ideas would also come. I think we all have had an incident where we drink a lot with our friends and say, tomorrow I'm going to start this idea. I've got this business plan. Oh, we should do this. Let's go on a trip like that. People explore bigger ideas over this social liaison. So alcohol was still not alcohol till Chandragupta Maurya was there. It became a little bastardized, a little abused a little later. So Chanakya was the first guy who created wines out of grapes, created taverns or bars where alcohol could be served officially. More importantly, he was the first person to ever tax alcohol, because earlier currency was not really prevalent, but under Chandragupta Maurya, currency became quite an important idea. and taxes on alcohol for the first time was levied by Chanakya. So we generally joke that our excise system in India today dates back to to 300 BC, the era of Chanakya and Chandragupta Maurya, but an important person in the history of alcohol creation. We have this joke in the industry: all bald guys working in the alcohol sector are very important. So thanks a lot for that press speech. Uh, Fast forward, even though the Mughals were considered to be Islamic in origin, which is not completely true, but Mughals, when they came into India, Babur, the first ruler of from the Timurid Empire, when he came to India, he came from Kabul and Ghazni and various other places, and he brought grapes. He brought a lot of fruits to India: apricot, peaches, not watermelon, rock melon, of course, grapes. These were all brought by Babur, and he brought them to India. And the first few places where he grew them was Gujarat and Punjab. You have to understand, under Gujarat was a different empire altogether, and Babur never reached those places. But as you can see in the picture here, we are looking at Punjab, which is not really the Punjab of India today. We're looking at the 1500s Punjab. Babur brought grapes and he grew it in Punjab and Gujarat, from where alcohol was actually created. So Mughals were also drinking alcohol. Well, the Rajas of Mewar, Marwar, of of Punjab, they were drinking alcohol, and how? But the today, vastness of grapes in India that we see today is probably thanks to the saplings that were brought in by Babur, which were much more solid. They could take way more heat than what India was providing, and hence they were more sustainable. So yeah, so Babur used to drink. Babur created alcohol as well. And fast forward to that, after Babur came, Babur came Humayun. After Humayun came Akbar. Akbar used to drink a lot. But more than Akbar came his rebellious son, Salim, Salim Chisti, right? And Salim, who was also called Jahangir. Jahan means the world, Gir means the ruler, so he was said to be the ruler of the world. He was rebellious. And rebellious in how? He started drinking when he was 6 years old. But it wasn't that he went to the kitchen and he said, "Oh, I want to drink that." It was fed to him, because he was so rebellious that his father said, "Keep him intoxicated so that he doesn't create any more mess." And he was the first son of Akbar, after so many prayers, going to Ajmer Sharif, going to Salim Chisti in Nizamuddin Aulia and whatnot. He was born, and after that, they also had two more kids, thanks to Jodhabai. And the other two kids died even before Jahangir was, succeeded to the throne, because of overdose of opium and alcohol, right? So we are looking at an era where alcohol was so prevalent that the kings were dying because of overconsumption. And amidst all of that, there was a little bit of refinement that came in Jahangir's life. He married this Persian lady called Noor Jahan. Noor means beauty, Jahan means world, said to be the most beautiful lady on the planet at that point in time. More beautiful than his niece, who was called Mumtaz Mahal, Shah Jahan's wife, right? And Jahangir and Noor Jahan, they became the insatiable powerhouses of their era. Noor Jahan was Persian. Her father actually brought Noor Jahan to India. And of course, Jahangir and Noor Jahan got married, and alcohol was very prevalent. Noor Jahan asked Jahangir to allow her to create a tomb for her father, which was probably the first tomb ever made by a daughter for her father in India at that point in time. And this gentleman was called Itmad Daula, which means the most prized jewel in the priciest collection of Akbar, right? This is a picture from the tomb of Itmad Daula, which was created by Jahangir and Noor Jahan after he passed away. And you can see there are kalash, there is glasses, there is drafts, and there are decanters and all of that stuff that is there. Alcohol, again, I mean, if in case I was to die tomorrow and I was to have a tomb, right? You're not going to put pictures that you like, rather you will, put pictures that I like on my own tomb. So the fact that Jahangir and Noor Jahan put all of this alcohol on the tomb of Itamat Daulah, from which the inspiration came for Taj Mahal, is amazing, and it shows that alcohol was very prevalent. However, even more prevalent, and we're talking about 1620s, so barely 400 years ago, even more prevalent was when Jahangir moved the production of alcohol from an outsourced area into his royal chambers in the fort of Lal Killa in Agra, which oversees Taj Mahal, right? So this is the fourth floor of the tomb of the fort, and you know, in forts, because earlier in these days, these guys were 6 feet tall, 7 feet tall. So of course, we're not looking at the same height as our rooms are. The fourth floor of the fort, on top of the fort, is this garden which is called the Anguri Bagh. And it is called the Anguri Bagh because angur or grapes were growing there. If you see this tiny little bush in the front, this is actually a real bush dating back to the era which came from Persia. And I mean, it does not give grapes anymore, but yeah, earlier in the days, what you see at the back where people are standing, that is the chamber for the kings and the queens to live. And in front of their chamber, grapes were being grown from which wines were being made, alcohol was being made, and was being served to the kings and queens on a daily basis. So imagine, from just being a consumable item to moving into the chambers of the kings and the queens, you now understand how important wine was. After this, from Agra, the capital was shifted by Shah Jahan to Delhi. And in Delhi, in the Lal Killa of Delhi, behind it, now runs GT Karnal Road. But before GT Karnal Road came into being, there was an Anguri garden, and wines were being grown in Delhi as well. Wines were being made in Delhi as well. Probably we should have had an appellation controle called Delhi AOC or something as well. But yeah, the Mughals, they were very keen on that. But moving away from Mughals, when we come into even more recent an era, there was a gentleman who I absolutely love, Mirza Ghalib, and he wrote this couplet, "Sharab peene de masjid mein baith ke, ya wo jagah bata jahan khuda nahi," right? Because he was of Islamic origin, although he was not a very religious man. But he used to drink a lot of alcohol, and he wrote a lot of couplets on alcohol. And he said, either tell me where the God does not exist so that I can sit there and drink, or if in case the God is available everywhere, then I might as well sit in, closer to him in a mosque and drink there. And people were not offended by it. Rather, it became one of his most famous couplets. When the British came, Mirza Ghalib was a very influential man, probably an influencer of his time. So the British actually took him and threw him in jail, and he was given a salary by the British rulers for the reason that he was in royal imprisonment. He was given a salary, and he said, yeah, what am I going to do with my salary? I don't care about my wife and my kids at all. These guys can fend for themselves. If I'm going to be in jail, what am I going to do with money? So the British said, okay, fine. So what else do you want? He said, turn that money into alcohol and give me alcohol. And they said, listen, nobody is getting alcohol in the jail. How can we give it to you? He said, I don't know. I'm a royal prisoner. So probably you'll have to, listen to what I have to say. And the British actually did that. He was given, he asked for 55 liters of alcohol per month, which is nearly 2 bottles per day, right? And the British said, no, we're not going to do that. We'll give you half of that. He was given 27 liters of bottles of alcohol every 30 days. So probably he kept 2 or 3 days just for his detox. But he used to drink 1 bottle every day. And what was he drinking? He was drinking Old Tom gin with rose water, with gulab jal, and he was drinking champagne. And when I say champagne, I'm not using this term loosely. I'm not saying he was drinking a sparkling wine. He was actually drinking champagne, the sparkling wine made from Chardonnay Pinot Noir, bottle fermented in the town of Champagne in France, because that's what the British were drinking. And he was a royal prisoner. So, of course, whatever the British were drinking, he was drinking pretty much the same, right? This is what was happening in the jails of Delhi. This is what Mirza Ghalib was up to. And we are looking at what, 150, 160 years from today, 1870s, right? Around that time, of course, the Sepoy Mutiny happened. Bahadur Shah Zafar lost the rule to the British. and alcohol consumption became very prevalent. So much so, alcohol was being made, opium and alcohol was made in abundance in India, and it was supplied to the Asian and Australasian colonies of India, from Java, Sumatra to to Sri Lanka, to the Maldives, to even as far as Australia and New Zealand, right? Because of two reasons. One, on the voyages, while they were going for colonization on their ships, they did not have a lot of spirits, so they used to drink a lot of wine, again as an antidote to the not so clean, not so fresh water that they were drinking on the ships for months upon months. That was one. And second thing, of course, we all know beers were not very prevalent in India. So the closest partially fermented or fermented liquid that they could get as an antidote was wine. So much so, in 1880s, Calcutta, which was the then capital under the British Empire, was hosted an international exhibition where all the countries took part, and there was a wine competition that happened, which Australia won. So this was in Calcutta. In India, we hosted a wine competition that was won by Australia by a company called Campbell, Campbell. I visited the winery in Australia in Rutherglen. I've seen that plaque with Bengal 1883 International Exhibition and everything. And yeah, it's a fascinating piece of history. This coin, commemorative coin, is still there in the National Museum in Delhi. I've seen it with my naked eyes, and I know that this was for real. So yeah, so the Archives of India still holds the details of that international exhibition. Now, this was again Bengal, and we are talking about 1880s. After this, there was a massive pandemic called phylloxera. Grapes were not grown, so we turned towards whiskey, we turned towards white and brown spirits. And by the time we came out of that, unfortunately, wars, depression, energy crisis, all of that started. So this is the time where the focus from alcohol production and consumption went away, and the British started, fighting from various parts of the world, even as a part of the World War or in their colonies, to sustain their power. And we all know, if you have read The Era of Darkness by Shashi Tharoor, how piece by piece India was broken down by the British and sent abroad for their own greedy reasons. But this is the time when India started going down in every single possible way that we can think of, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of agriculture, in terms of the general skill that India had. All of that started going away, and the focus completely shifted away from wines to spirits, more towards rum, more towards whiskey. And this is the era where beers took the center stage rather than wines. Now, after this, of course, the independence happened, and after independence, we were in a different, vibe, with different mood altogether. So we were not creating alcohol at that time. Rather, our dear rum, Old Monk, which came in 1956, was probably the only alcohol that we knew of at that time. And for the longest time, we did not even look at producing wines in the country. But come 1980s, which is barely 40 years ago, that is where the first foundation stone for Indian wines was laid by these companies called Chateau Indulge and Indy Wines, Indy Vineyards, sorry. Neither of the two exist anymore. 1982, 1993. When Chateau Indulge came in, I wasn't even born. So this is, a company which changed the face of wines in India. So Shamrao Chogle, who just passed away, he was single-handedly responsible for, making Indians fall in love with wines again. ND Wines had a humble start and they died rather quickly. So both these companies, they started the revolution and did their bit, fueled the fire, and then eventually they turned out to be a little sour. They moved out of the business and paved the path for Grover Zampa Vineyards and Sola Vineyards, which exist today and are amongst the two biggest companies in the country. From here, Kapil Grover, who was the founder of Grover Vineyards, he had been actually in the business for about a decade. He was growing grapes commercially for winemaking purposes for about a decade before he said, listen, why should I not make my own brand? And he went to Bordeaux and he found this gentleman called Michel Roland, whose name is still there on La Reserve bottles, who was sort of like the, I don't know, Amitabh Bachchan of the wine industry in France at that time. Brought him to India, brought some of the plants from a winery called Costes Tornel, one of the biggest names in the region at that time. Took them, grew them in India. Through the union of these two, they basically made the first wine in India. And very soon, a wine that we all have seen, we all have heard, probably we have all relished, called La Reserve, was born, which was probably the first premium wine coming out of India. Even today, when we talk about good quality red wine in India, La Reserve is one of the names that is still counted amongst the better ones in the country. But yeah, this gentleman, Mr. Kapil Grover, who has now retired, the family has sold their majority of their stake to other people. He was the one who started the revolution. Then came another bald gentleman, very important, Rajiv Salman. He was not in India. He was working in California, drinking a lot of wines, working in the Silicon Valley. And he said his parents, grandparents had this massive plantation of grapes, commercial table grapes. And he said, yeah, why can't India make good wines? So he came back to India and he turned all of those table grapes into wine-making grapes. Brought this gentleman, Kerry Damsky, who is said to be the godfather of Californian wine industry at one point in time, and said, can we make quality wines in India? And they started working together. While the Grover family was more on the French and the European style of it, old school style of it, Sula started producing wines in a very new world style of it, and changed the world for with fruity, clean, vivacious wines. Rajiv's mother's name is Sula, and that's the name of the company. And Rajiv's initials, which is RASA, became a new label, the highest label that the winery produces, called Rasa, which is something which is very, very interesting in the country right now. After this came this era when the government messed up a little bit. Now, when I say the government messed up a little bit, did the government mess up or did the people mess up? We don't know. But Karnataka and Maharashtra are the two places where wines are made, the grapes are grown for winemaking the most. Both being agricultural states, the government came in and they started giving subsidies and loans and tax holidays to people to set up wineries. A lot of people came into being. In this one decade, I think around 144 new wineries came into being. By the end of that, I think around 9 or 10 existed. Rest of them, they created a tiny little tin shed situation, took the loans from the government for about 5 crores, which was the basic loan that you were getting without any tax implied on you, without any interest to be paid. They created them. It was basically a sham. A lot of people said, oh, we have got a winery, give us the money. They gave the money, took the money, and just flew off. So these 10 years were probably, I would say, and this is just me saying this, were not the brightest era of the wine industry, but what remained out of it was the real deal, where these beautiful brands like York, Rivello, Charisma, Vallone, Fratelli, they came up, and along with them came up new regions for winemaking in India. Not just Nasik, not just Nandi Hills in Karnataka. Fratelli came up with this area which is around 400 kilometers from Nasik, called Akluj, where Shivaji's army was confronted by Aurangzeb's army at one point in time. And then Charisma came up in Hampi Hills, which is completely barren. There is no water and it's rather hot. When it rains, it's monstrous. When it rains heat, it is monstrous. We did not even know that Charisma could actually, or rather Hampi Hills could produce wines. But again, a new area also came up, and that is when we started realizing that there is this new talent. There's this new fresh thought of winemaking in the country. There are these new regions coming up. They brought new grape varieties, like Rivello brought Sangiovese to India for the first time in 2006. And the Italians were like, oh, India? Sangiovese? No. But today, India produces amongst the best Sangioveses New World countries could produce. Um, Bologna brought a lot of French technology to India, and the wind actually changed. So York is run by these two beautiful brothers. York actually stands for Yogita, Ravi, and Kailash. They are siblings, so Yogita has nothing to do with the business. The gentleman with specs is Ravi, and Kailash is the winemaker who studied in Australia, came back to India, and started making wines here. Very new world, very clean style wines, expressive wines made by York. I personally love their winemaking philosophy, and I'm a big fan of what they do. Well, again, bald guys can't go wrong. Yatin Patel and Kiran Patel, they were working in the US, working these massive big jobs, and they left that and came back to take over their hereditary, plantation of grapes, turned that into winemaking grapes. 90% of their production, even today, goes to Sula. And with the 10% of production that they hold, they have Sangiovese, Nero Diavola, Grillo. They produce India's only unoaked Cabernet Sauvignon. Um, and I think the best dessert wine India has ever produced comes from them. Absolutely amazing stuff. Very family oriented wines. They are very bad with their marketing, I believe, but their wines are so beautiful and so worth it that I think it's good that they don't market their wines and become a bulk production producer. Came Valone, Mr. Shailendra Pai. He's the person who created Marcus de Pompadour or Umar Khayyam, India's first sparkling wine for Chateau Indage. When Chateau Indage, shut down, he started his own winery with his son Advait, who's in the front, and Sanket at the back, who would probably be the youngest winemaker in the country of the time. Not anymore. Now he's 12 years older, so of course he's not the youngest. But again, family oriented, small little winery. They have a tiny little restaurant there. Go and stay there. I think the best view in Nasik that you can get at a winery is with Valone Vineyards. So if not for anything, go there for their view, and you will fall in love with the wines any which way. Came these brothers called the Fratelli Brothers. Fratelli company, basically Fratelli is the Italian word for brothers. So they were these Maharashtrian brothers called the Mohite Patil brothers. They were the Sekhri brothers from Delhi, and Alessio and Piero Masi were brothers from Italy. They came together and they started making wines, very, very different wines from as compared to what India had seen. They produced Chianti style wines, Super Tuscan style wines, Italian style, high acidic, low sugar wines, and they changed the course of of how the wines were perceived in India by producing some really high quality wines. And then came this husband-wife duo, marathon runners, Guinness World Book record holders, the first and only couple on the planet to have run 7 marathons in 7 different continents within a specific period of time. Asia's third biggest pharmaceutical company is run by Mr. Krishna Chikrapati, and he is a fine wine drinker, and he wanted to produce wines that he used to travel for in India, and that's why they did it. So Charisma actually is a mix of Krishna and Uma. So Charisma also, because it is made in Barrenlands of Hampi, which is a charisma by itself. I think the name also resonates with that idea. Absolutely beautiful Cabernet Sauvignons. I'm very jealous of Bangalore, who gets all of these wines, but Delhi, Bombay don't get it. Heartbreaking, very heartbreaking. But anyway, it's not just the locals who are trying to push the market up. A lot of international eyes have come to India. So, for example, Shandon, one of the biggest luxury houses in the world with the LVMH. They also own Louis Vuitton, Gucci, Versace, and God knows, luxury stuff basically. They produce the maximum amount of sparkling wines on the planet, with having their wineries also in Argentina, in Australia, in China, and out of all the countries, they picked up India, and they started growing grapes here. And by that came a lot of confidence in the Indian winemakers that yes, there's something right about the Indian industry, that somebody like LVMH is putting their money in India and promoting the industry. Even before them came Pernod Ricard with Nine Hills, the Seagram's brand, the people who produce Jacob's Creek and Brancott Estate and all of those GH Mum champagne, they came up and they started making wines called Nine Hills, which I think do not exist on the planet anymore. And Four Seasons, which was a part of the UB group, which was taken over by Diageo. Again, a lot of international money was put into it with French technology from Bouvay-la-Dubé from Loire Valley in France. International eyes stuck on India just because the land had a lot of potential, which we were trying to keep as a secret, but they said, "Hey, why don't we get a piece in the pie?" Right? Other brands were also there. They are still there. Some of them are there. They make wine. Some of them have been taken over, like Myra Charosa, SDU. They have been taken over. Renaissance still produces wines. Oakwood actually produces a lot of wines for other people. And Big Banyan is owned by people who also own Paul John whiskies. So, Indian wines, what's happening here? First of all, what we need to know is there is a grape belt on the planet. Now, what is a grape belt? For every agricultural product, there is the optimum climate, optimum temperature, and position on the planet. If you see India, we are very close to the equator and we are not on the wine belt. So any rule, any principle, any guiding theory that applies to the world in terms of winemaking does not apply to India at all. So the first thing that we should be super proud of in India, and I write it in every article, my opening line is that, listen, you have to see India from a very different window altogether, because our position on the planet is very different. And general rules, whatever our books teach us, what our respected teachers teach us, do not apply in practicals to India, just because we are not on the belt. So first thing first, what India had to do was do a lot of hit and trial and come up with its own, encyclopedia, its own rule book, and say, listen, our wines cannot be compared with the French and the Italians and the Aussies and the Chileans for the simplest of reasons. They are dealt with a good hand, we are not. Right? So I think the most important picture in the world of wines for the Indian context is this one, just saying we are not in the same race. We are not running the same, the same revolution that somebody else was. Because of this, our wine map is very different. You would say that, listen, the northern head of India is still on the grape belt, so why don't we make wines on the Himalayan ranges? If you would know, 32 states, we are basically 32 different countries. Alcohol and petroleum are two things which are ruled by the state government. And if the state government does not want alcohol production with grapes in their region, we can't do anything. Maharashtra and Karnataka, which are south, which are even warmer for grape production, because they are agricultural based in economies, they allow grape growing and wine production to be there. And you might say, yeah, we're going further south. It is warm. How is it that we're not making wines in the warmer areas? We have a lot to thank to the Indian Ocean and the Bengal Bay, Bay of Bengal, where the cool ocean winds actually negate that heat from the southern part of India. And that's how grapes can actually be grown here. So Sholapur, Nashik, Sangli, Baramati, these are some of the regions of Maharashtra. And Nandi Hills and Hampi, these are the two regions in Karnataka that we guys can actually say are superior places for grape growing and winemaking. Further comes this idea that, listen, how in France we have Premier Cru, Grand Cru, we have Classico in Chianti. Is this something that will ever come into India? Or is it that you grow the grapes, you crush them, make wines, and just drink them? Well, this is the more interesting thing. A few years ago, there came a map of Cruz in Nasik as well, which is which will actually come when it will come, right? So before that comes this idea: what are the grape varieties that work in India? Okay, sorry. Right. So what are the grape varieties that work in India? So there are a few which are champions. For example, Sangiovese, Italian grape variety in India, has worked amazingly well, beautifully well. And you know, I've been on the panel of DOCG of Chianti. I've tasted 400 Chiantis in a day for 5 days at a time for 5 years. And I can tell you that some of the good Sangioveses in the country, especially by Rivello and Fratelli, are actually superlative Sangioveses and have worked very well. Hot climate countries, varieties like Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, Shiraz, they have worked very well, and they are only being explored even further for even better production. Basic white grape varieties like Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Chenin Blanc, they have worked very well. And the one white grape variety that actually flourishes in warm climate, which is Viognier, has taken to India the way no grape variety has ever taken. More importantly, Viognier has taken to India the way Viognier has not taken anywhere on the planet. Right. So coming back to this, what we were talking about, that some of the grape varieties that have championed themselves in on the Indian soils are these, and some of the grape varieties to look forward to are definitely Tempranillo and, more importantly, Grenache. Very exciting grape variety here, and Riesling. So I've written very recently. I've written an article on Rieslings and how they are going to be the next champions in the country. Once it comes out, I'll share it with Mr. Zakaria, and probably he can pass it on to you. Also, rosé wines. Very exciting category in India. Now, how did we create all of these rules and regulations and these encyclopedic knowledge about what happens in India? We have learned it by practice. A simple example: this is the picture of Valone vineyards when it was grown back in the days, I think in 2010. See the first picture, and you would see that the plants are actually grown in a different direction. Now, what happened was they realized that in the evening, what are called katabatic winds from the mountains in front of them and the water body that you can see in front of them, the winds will flow in the evening towards the winery, and they would actually, fight with the plants and disturb the harmony of the vineyard. Because of which they had to do a lot of activity in the vineyards, and slowly and steadily they took this very important and commercially challenging decision to change the face of the vineyard. And the lower picture, if you would see, it's the direction of the plants had been changed. Now this is about a 2 year of financial stress. For 2 years you cannot grow grapes because the plants have been uprooted and replanted, so you can't do anything about it. But as a part of it, what happened was, in the evening the wind would just flow parallel to these plants, and what it would do is it would take all the dirts and the insects and the bacteria and all of that out of the vineyard and give it cool winds which would keep the plant healthy. And that is something that you would not see in the history of the world that a lot of vineyards have actually been able to do. But the fact that India did that, and Valone paved the way for this sort of a knowledge in India, is absolutely amazing. And I personally have been tasting their wines at the winery from day one, ever since they were made till today. And I can tell you the progression in the quality of wines that they are making is amazing. That journey of a few years is absolutely amazing. I was also a part of replanting the vineyard, so this is definitely a personal connection in a way. Apart from that, last year in 2020, before the lockdown happened for the first time, I made a visit to Nasik just for my own knowledge, and I realized that anything that you can think of in the winemaking spectrum that is written in the books, India is doing that. So the first picture that you see is a process which is called the Recioto process, where you sun dry the grapes a little bit, you concentrate the juices and the color and all of that, and then make those wines, from which the famous wines of Amarone della Valpolicella are made. In Beaujolais, we talk of this term called carbonic maceration. That is happening in India. The picture that you see here is a picture that I took, which is bottle fermentation of sparkling wines, as in cava, as in champagnes, as in Franciacorta. It happens. India is doing that. What you see in the next picture are these vertical tanks. You see that there is, on the right hand side, that there's a different layer, different floor of tanks, and then there is a lower one behind it. There is gravitational winemaking happening, that you're not pumping the juice down, you're letting just the gravity do, nature do what it has to do, right? And because of that, what is happening is that tiny little change, you're not pushing the wines, The wines are happier, they're healthier, and they eventually turn into something which is, when you put it on the palate, they put that smile on your face as well because they were treated well in the process. You see these cement tanks, these are going back into history, these are called concrete tanks or concrete eggs, which Georgia started, France championed, and now India also has it. And this is not something which a lot of new world countries are toying with. Finally, you see this pneumatic press, but again, this is at Shandon. Rather than taking the grapes up by hand and turning the basket upside down into the press, they've got this trolley, this elevator where the grapes go up, right, in a bucket, and the bucket turns upside down. So a gentler process is happening, and this is about 13 lakh rupees worth of just elevator. The pneumatic press is in crores and crores, but just this elevator is 13 lakhs, and that 13 lakh rupees of investment is essential to create quality in India, which the world is now, appreciating in every part. When I travel abroad, well, when I used to travel abroad before 2020, I used to carry Indian wines and open them for my friends in the media circle abroad or for my taster friends abroad, and they would be like, "Man, we didn't know India was doing this." And 1,000 salutations are provided to Indian wines because of all of this technology that has come up. This is what I was talking about earlier, like a Chablis Grand Cru or a Burgundy Grand Cru or a Bordeaux Grand Cru or a Chianti Classico area, vineyard selection, vineyard categorization. This is the map of Nasik, which is about barely 100 kilometers of stretch from point A to point B. People have started to say, okay, Cabernet aayega Pimplegaon se, Shiraz aayega Nifar se, Ojhar ka Cabernet goes into reserve winemaking, Dindori produces very good Chardonnay, Gangapur Dam produces good quality Sauvignon Blanc. This sort of categorization has already started in India. And probably in maybe 2 or 3 years, maybe 5 years at best, we might start to see these terms on the labels as well. Probably on the back label first and then on the front label. But how we talk about, vineyards in the European countries, probably we'll start to see that in India as well. And that is something that has happened in 40 years. They took 1,000 years to do that. India is doing that in 40 years. And that is a massive, massive, growth for just Indian winemakers. Another interesting thing that India has done is that they have not let the vineyard areas just be a commercial winemaking area or an agricultural area where farmers work. They have created that into a tourism hub. This is a picture from my first visit to Nasik ever in 2009. I had just come back from Australia. My standards were very different. I had not seen this broken road for 2 years and everything. My colleague and I, we took a bus from Dadar TT in Bombay, and we landed ourselves in Nasik, and we hired this Tata Indica, and we said, yeah, let's just call people. There was no GPS facility, there were no signboards, there were no tiny little villages there that could have told us that, oh, that building, concrete building, that is where a winery exists, right? So we went in there, and this picture, I love it, even though it is a low resolution picture. There were no streets. Our car was stuck in a storm. For last 1 kilometer, we had to walk in formal shoes in this sort of a condition to reach a winery where there was no electricity. There was brick and mortar and cement, and wines were not served out in glasses, but in these tiny little quarter bottles of Royal Stag that the staff was drinking the night before. This is what 2009 was. This is what was happening in that 10-year decade, which was the turning time for the Indian wine industry. From this is how our wineries look today. People get married at wineries. People go there for vacations. Mansion style wineries are there, mansion style accommodation facilities with fine dining restaurants where the fruits and the vegetables are grown just next to the winery, where you can go and pluck it and give it to the chef and say, "Isse khana bana do," and you'll get to eat that, right? This is how they look on the outside. This is how they look on the inside. You would have never seen these pictures and said, "Oh shit, this is a winery. 10,000 rupees a night." You open the door and you just see plush green, vineyards with beautiful fruit orchards and all that stuff as far as your eye can run. You have tubs, full on gluttony and everything. This is how a wineries look today, right? And all of this has happened in the last 10 years. Agrotourism took about 125 years in Italy. India has done that in 5 years. Why? Because we can't wait for the things to happen. We have to make things happen in India. When Mohit Chandon came up with their winery, this is how it looks. So if you see from the lower tip where there is a street that is going, that street goes and it stops at the back, and you would see that the winery is actually a little angular. Again, this is a gravity-oriented winery. Not even a human existence, sign of human existence for as far as you can see. You travel for about 1.5 hours and you're like, man, there's no break, there's no mortar. Where is this winery? And suddenly this massive winery shows up. It puts a smile on your face and you're like, oh, damn, this looks like DDLJ ka set or that, not DDLJ. These big, Karan Johar movies sets, puts a massive smile on your face and say, oh shit, this is India. Gravity oriented wines, very clean, technical wineries. And this is how it looks during the day. And this is how it looks at the night. Absolutely amazing. If somebody was to show this picture to you and say, where possibly could this winery be? You would have never said India. But this is what is happening in the Indian wine industry. And that's why I said, most exciting time to be there. I think the smile on my face should tell you that. This is Fratelli Vineyards, nothing nearby, but they have about 140 hectares of vineyards. They had to basically take explosives and break mountains and creeks down and take these massive boulders, throw them away, and plant vineyards there. Absolutely, the symbol of human determination is what Fratelli Vineyards are. Today, you can go and stay there. You can make your own wine when you go there. You can go to the barrel room and pick up liquids and make your own blend of wines. They have 4x4 quad bikes, dirt bikes. You can just go around. All the food comes from the village nearby. So those are the ladies who grow the food, and they are the ones who will come to you and say, "What do you want to eat today?" You can tell them, and they'll cook it for you. It's an oasis in the middle of nowhere, but again, something that puts a smile on your face. So these are the places that people aspire to go and stay now, for very obvious reasons that they are a destination now, not just a winemaking facility. This is the wine tasting room for Grover Zampa in Bangalore. You can see this very theatric sort of oasis. Not just this, there are music festivals, international music festivals that happen at wineries now, which is like Sula Fest, where big auditions happen, big performances happen. We all know about it. So I think wineries have done very well consciously in the last 10 years to bring people to it and say, this is not just a winemaking facility. This is not a daru banane ki bhatti. This is an experience by itself. And people are wowed by it. I mean, I know it for a fact. My family that does not know much about alcohol, they go to very traditional tourist spots. If they were to go to wineries, they would love it. If not, I think alcohol will help them find their peace there. It's not just all happy from the outside. At the back of it, this is the picture of Sula Vineyards. You would see solar panels. Today, Sula Vineyards uses 60% of the energy that they use come from the energy that they create by themselves by the virtue of solar energy. And this is what majority of the wineries are moving towards. It is said that by 2025, 90% of the energy that will be used by wineries in Nasik will be produced by themselves. And of course, by that comes the water harvesting, restoring of the natural habitat in the area, various other things. Now, finally, is there a promising future in the country? First of all, I think these awards themselves tell you that the international market, the international palate is accepting wines of India. And let me tell you this, majority of the wineries that are in India have done less than 10 years of harvest. In less than 10 years of experience, you're winning gold in decanters and India Wine Challenge and San Francisco Wine Challenge. I think this is the biggest, confirmation that we are on the right path. And these awards are only growing. Second thing is, which is something which I'm really proud of, is that earlier in the days, these Kerry Damskis and the Michel Rolands and international winemakers came to India and taught India how to make wines, which was a good idea to begin with, but not the right idea, because we understand our culture and our land way better than anybody from the outside. Today, when you go to Indian wineries, you see faces like Ravi at York, Amrut at Shandon, Karan at Sula, Sanket at Valone. You do not see even a single international winemaker in the country. So what has happened is our young generation took upon themselves as a responsibility that we are the future of the country. We are supposed to learn our trade tricks on our own, create our own rules, and they learned it and they are now running them. Kailash is less than, I think he's younger than me, so he's less than 35 for sure. Karan, I know, is less than 35. Sanket might be around 30. Amrut might around be 35 years old. These are young guys who are making award-winning wines for international winemakers in India, right? And that is something which is so interesting, that we are drafting our own history, our own revolution, our own journey, rather than somebody from the outside telling us how to do it. How do India drink their wines? First thing first is, I think this is something which is, you know, engraved in our systems, in our societies, that we are very family-oriented people. Look at our food. Thali system came from India, where brothers, at the end of the day, eat from the same thali. Family-oriented wineries have actually been performing way better than commercial wineries in the country. Look at Sula, a son named a winery for his mother. Grover Zampa, a fine winery, a family that defined wines in India. Valone, run by father and son. York, run by brothers. Rivello, run by a couple. Fratelli, run by brothers. Family-oriented wineries have done way better than commercial wineries, and I can name wineries which are commercially run, but I think you get the point here. So first thing first, if you have heard of the family, if you know of a family running a winery, chances are you would like to drink those wine better, not only in India, even abroad. Torres, the biggest Spanish name in the country, Gaia, well, examples are endless, but you get the point. Second thing, amongst all the beverages in the country right now, the highest growing number is in the wine section, which is 15% year upon year. Even more interesting is that even though the market is growing at 15%, the value of that market is growing even higher. So what that means is, it's not just the numbers, it's the value proposition that is going up. People are spending more money in getting their wines on the table. They are drinking better quality wines rather than just picking up a bottle and saying, yeah, I've got a fermented grape juice in my glass today and I'm drinking wine because wine is wine. Those 500 rupees, 600 rupees bottles are now turning into 1200 rupees, 1700 rupees, more than 2000 rupee bottles, which is the biggest trend maker in the country right now. The same is happening with whiskeys, thanks to Amruts and the Paul Johns and the Rampurs. Same is happening with gins, thanks to Pomori and Hapushas and the Greater Dans and the Terais and the Stranger and Sons and whatnot. Value proposition going up is a bigger promise rather than the numbers growing up, right? The luxury market in India is growing at 21%. So I think 15% is just something in the process. It will only get better. The next thing is retail stores.
Gagan, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Please keep a check on the time. We
I'm
will
almost
need
about to
some
finish.
time for Q&A. Yeah, thank you.
I've just got 2 more slides and that's it. So coming back to this, more than hotels and restaurants, people are buying wines at retail, which basically means they are consciously going to the stores, they're consciously looking at the labels and trying to compare different wines and making conscious, educated decisions, which is a great thing. Which also creates competition, keeps the price in check rather than luxury drinks in a hotel. More consumption is happening at home rather than anywhere else, and I think lockdown superimposed that idea upon us. And as I said, premiumization. Every winery now is creating a classic range to a higher range, and from higher range, even higher range with international collaborations and various other things. However, the biggest and the best sign of growth is this picture. I don't know, this might be someplace in Bombay. I don't know, maybe Kandivali or Dadar or someplace. But by 2025, the world's biggest, youngest population, young population is between I think 18 to 45. The biggest young population on the planet would be in India. And this is the generation which is conscious about what food they put in their body, thanks to master chefs and various other things. What alcohol they are drinking, they want to know the story, they want to know the provenance of it. They want to go to the source of the food and learn about it there. High disposable income, internationally traveled, has a higher lifestyle, and they understand the value of money as well. Their 2,000 rupees is worth every single drop of sweat, blood, and tear that they have put in the process. So they're not going to abuse the money. For 2,000 rupees, they're going to find consciously the best value for money proposition and consume that. So this is the reason why a lot of international brands, wine, beer, spirits, food, clothing, luxury, automobile, electronics, they are coming to India because of this massive population which is ready to lift their standards to a level that probably the country hasn't seen in the past. And yeah, majority of us are a part of it. So good job. So yeah, that is what it is. Very promising times, but yeah, if you have any questions now, anything that we can
Yes,
discuss,
we will straight away jump into questions because of the lack of time. Anyways, thank you very much for this amazing talk and presentation. I won't have time to read individual questions. So there is a lot of questions regarding pairing Indian wines with the Indian foods, and also cooking with wines. What wine is best for cooking in India? So could you please share your views on that?
Sure, sir. So I have a very anti-hero idea about food and wine pairing in the Indian context. First thing, we in India, we never paired alcohol with our food. We have always been a market where we eat and we drink our drinks and then move on to the dinner table. Food and wine pairing, or rather pairing food with anything alcoholic, has never been a part of our culture. If there is a book, if there is a transcript, I'm more than happy to look at it. First thing. Second thing, food and wine pairing rules were created by the Europeans. Red meat with red wine, white meat with white wine, all of that stuff. In India, the gravy, the sauce is the hero, right? Even today, when we go to restaurants, we say, "Acha, paneer mein kya hai?" And all the gravies will be available. We would say, "Okay, fine, we have a palak gravy. We can make palak chicken, we can make palak meat, we can make palak kofta, we can make palak paneer, we can make palak aloo, whatever." Palak is the hero. The starch or the protein is not the hero. By that virtue, the meat oriented food pairing rules do not apply to India. So I've written an article on food and wine pairing and the 7 rules that I attach to food and wine pairing in India. I'll share that with you happily, and you can skim through it. But food and wine pairing in Indian context is not something that we ever did. And that is the reason why this is one topic that I would request um, people to have two-way approach. One, redefine the rules, and second, quite honestly, it's a redundant exercise to talk about food and wine pairing in India with Indian cuisines. More importantly, so just stay away from it. That's what I would say. I'm not trying to run away from the technical question.
I think we are more than happy with our beer and Indian food.
We're just happy with any alcohol and then cover up with food, the tummies with food, so that they just suck all the alcohol and we don't have a hangover or dehydration the next morning. But Mr. Zakaria, I'll send you the article that I've written on food and wine pairing in the Indian context. And I think that will shed a lot of light on the topic. So yeah.
I'll take a question from Mr. Vivek Anand. Why can't we produce red sparkling wine under a controlled fermentation vat?
So actually, sir, this question also has been answered by Sula Vineyards. There is a sparkling Shiraz in the country. We have already started making sparkling red wines. We have to understand it is not about what grape we have and what technology we have. We also have to understand that all the wineries are in the business to be in the business. They have to cater to what the consumers want. And consumers, if they don't want a red sparkling wine, it is a redundant exercise for any winery to invest that knowledge and effort into it. So right now, I think we are going through a phase where we are just premiumizing our whites and the reds and our sparklings. Rosé wines, dessert wines, and sparkling red wines is something that we will work on in the future. However, if you want a sparkling red wine, Sula already has a sparkling Shiraz, so I think that answers your question. Yeah.
Right. Take a question from Ms. Vasantara. Have we lost Umar Khayyam MDB forever? I mean, is it still available? Is it still being made?
Unfortunately not. Yeah.
Right. This question is interesting from Ms. Mohini. Could you please share some information about the Indian wine laws?
So Indian wine laws, again, in India, it's not just about wine in terms of alcohol. So first of all, wine laws are divided into two parts. One is the viticultural part, which is the grape growing part. And then comes the vinification part, which is the conversion of those grape juice into alcohol. And then comes a very different law, which is the retail and the hotel, where the bottle, certain label has to be there, certain information has to be there. So in terms of the production part of it, which is the grape growing part of it, there are no laws in the country. There was a created by the Ministry of Food Processing in India, which obviously in the board of directors, they created a board which is called the Indian Grape Processing Board. But it was more about processing grapes to make syrups and table grapes and making industrial products out of it, not specifically for wines. When it comes to wine making, there are no laws available in the country right now. When it comes to wine selling, every state has its own law. That is the reason why the same alcohol might not be available in all states. The prices will differ. In Gurgaon, which is like barely a few miles away from my house, you can give discounts on alcohol. You can give a glass or a cup or a table mat with a bottle of whiskey or vodka or with wine. In Delhi, giving schemes on alcohol are not allowed. In Bangalore, you can sell pani and soda and chips and even bananas in a liquor store. In Delhi, you can't. So unfortunately, the laws are not centrally governed, and that's the reason why alcohol and petrol do not come under the GST, governed by the state and the center. It is just a state policy. We've been running it like this. I think this is a conversation that we need to bring in Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel into, and just not going to go into that politics at all. But yeah.
Okay. I'll just quickly pick a few questions. I think we have time for 2 or 3 more questions.
Sure. Yeah.
Can you describe the greatest wine and wine experience you have ever had? Question from Sri Lakshmi.
Oh, well, actually, there'll be actually a lot of them. One of my favorites was, we were in Italy and I was tasting wines at a winery ranging from 1952 to 2012. This was in Barolo in Italy. And not all 50, 52, we were not tasting all the vintages, but a few vintages from every decade. And there was a wine that I tasted where I made a face and was like intrigued about it, but I was quietly writing my tasting notes. And once the thing was done, I think the winemaker thought he's an Indian guy. What does he know about wines? Blah blah blah. They asked me that you made a very curious face when you were going from 1992 to 1996. What happened there? I said, I think the personality of the winemaker changed. Something happened in your family. Did somebody die? She said, what? How can you taste a wine and say if somebody died in my family? I said, just answer the question. She said, yeah, my grandfather used to make wines. He passed away in 1994, and my husband took over winemaking. And 1996 was a different personality altogether. I said I could taste that and I could tell, because 1992 was made by a person who was very humble, had a lot of wisdom, was an old person who had seen everything in his life and was putting simplicity in the wine. And the 96 vintage was made by a man who was young and energetic, wanted to put more power into their wines. And that is something that you could see. And she said, oh, damn, I did not realize that about my wines. By just tasting two wines, you could tell that the winemaker had changed and the personality of the humans who were making those wines were so different. And imagine we were tasting a 1992 vintage in 2016. So the wine was already 25 years old. And those tiny nuances would have been further, discounted, but it was still there. And that is the reason why, these experiences make you realize that wine is not an alcoholic beverage. It is an experience. It's an extension of somebody's life story. And then you respect it even more. So, yeah.
Okay. My sincere apologies to all the people who have posted questions, but we will not be able to take every questions right now. We have only 3 more minutes left. I'll take one last question from Dr. Pankaj Kumar Singh, which I think is an interesting one. Drinkers are not respectable, but they are important for economy. I mean, what would you like to say about it?
Sir, I think the new generation is becoming more conscious health-wise. Look at the amount of antioxidants that we consume. We are going towards organic, biodynamic, probiotic food, and all of that stuff. We have become more conscious about cocktails as well. We want to know how much sugar is going in, the provenance of the ingredient. I completely agree that in some, I mean, we can't talk about the global, the global scenario by picking up a few examples or vice versa. So I do understand that, yeah, a lot of people abuse alcohol as well. It is important for the economy, but we have been seeing trends of better consumption, quality consumption, more conscious consumption in our country. I think more and more fine dining places have opened up. So yeah, probably we'll just have to keep our fingers crossed and say, how lockdown was, that people should follow social distancing and the norms so that you stay healthy and you survive. I think that is what is coming to wines and food and other things as well. Probably not as much in tobacco and various other things, but in alcohol, definitely there's a premiumization happening. So we'll just have to keep our fingers crossed and say probably the next decade will be better than the last one and the present one. So yeah, but I agree with what he's saying. Yeah, the general image is there.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. With this, I think it is time for us to end our journey here with Gagan right now. Thank you very much, Gagan, for this enlightening session. I'm sure many of the participants will contact you, will approach you with a lot more questions because it's flooded with questions in the chat box. So I would pass it over to Usha ma'am to take it further. Thank you very much,
So,
Gagan. Have a nice
sir,
day.
just before we leave, because I see there's a lot of questions and I would love to answer all of them because that's what the whole purpose of this presentation was. I'm putting my email ID and our
Great.
Instagram handles. If you ever wish to get in touch and get any of your questions answered, whatever is in my wisdom and in my knowledge, I would love to pass it on. Drop me a mail so that I can share the links of the articles about Indian wines, about Indian food and wine pairing, and various other things. And if you find them interesting, you can always come back and read them. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Please check out your chat box. Mr. Gagan has put in his email address and other contact details. So over to Usha ma'am now. Thank you, Gagan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Gagan, for that valuable and very knowledgeable session on wines. Very interesting it was. I would say, I really enjoyed your session.
Thanks a
Yeah,
lot.
you just took us to various wineries. Oh, very lovely it was.
Thank you, Ram. Thank you. And
Thanks.
I would sincerely hope, that this knowledge is just not theoretical. I would encourage all Indians to, take a 2-day, 3-day trip to Nasik and go and see what's happening on the ground. It's a life-altering process. And yeah, so pleased that I could share all of this information and knowledge with all of us. And thanks a lot for this opportunity.
Oh, thanks a lot. Lovely session. I
Thank you.
really, from my heart, I'm saying I enjoyed thoroughly.
Thank you, ma'am.
So
Thanks a
nice.
lot.